At my birthday dinner, my dad raised a toast to my brother, my pride and joy, then looked at me and said, "You? Just a life lesson." I smiled. That was the last time they saw me as a failure. Ever had that moment when your own family confirms what you've suspected they thought of you all along? Yeah? That moment happened to me 3 years ago on my 28th birthday, and TBH, it changed everything. So, I guess I should start with some background. I'm Derek, the family disappointment, the one who dropped out of college in my second year because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with my life, while my older brother Keith was already killing it in his career. Not that anyone in my family would let me forget it. Anyway, growing up in our house was basically the Keith show. His trophies lined the hallway: debate team, tennis championships, academic awards. Meanwhile, I was average at pretty much everything. Not bad enough to be a problem child, just forgettable. Dad would spend hours helping Keith prepare for tournaments or competitions, while I got the classic figure-it-out-yourself treatment. Mom loved us both, I think, but she never stood up to Dad when he'd compare us. By the time I hit my late 20s, I was still living at home. Yes, I know how pathetic that sounds, working random gigs and trying to figure out WTF to do with my life. Keith? He had the perfect apartment downtown, drove a Tesla, and was apparently revolutionizing something in his field. Dad wouldn't shut up about it during Sunday dinners. Those Sunday dinners, man. Pure psychological torture. Dad asking Keith about his latest accomplishments while asking me if I'd found a real job yet. Mom quietly refilling water glasses and changing the subject when things got too uncomfortable. Me staring at my plate, wishing I could disappear. My birthday rolled around that April, and Mom insisted on having a special dinner at home. I wanted to skip it because I knew exactly how it would go, but she gave me that guilt trip look that Mom's perfect over decades. So I agreed. The day of my birthday, I helped Mom prep dinner, because that's what I always did. Keith showed up an hour late, surprise, surprise, with some expensive whiskey for Dad and flowers for Mom. Nothing for me on my own birthday, but whatever. I was used to it. Dinner was the usual. Keith talking about his travels and deals, while I pushed food around my plate. Dad hanging on his every word. Mom asking me to pass the potatoes. Typical Wednesday in our house, except with a store-bought cake waiting on the counter. When Mom brought out the cake, I felt like I was 10 again, not 28. That same awkward kid who never quite measured up. Dad decided this was the perfect moment for a toast. He stood up, glass in hand, looking all proud and fatherly. He started by talking about how amazing it was to witness Keith's journey, calling him his pride and joy, and going on about how Keith was everything he'd hoped his son would become. Everyone was nodding and smiling. Then Dad turned to me. The room got quiet. Dad's face changed, and he said that I was just a life lesson. He actually said that raising me taught him about patience and accepting that not everyone is meant for greatness. On my birthday, in front of everyone. You know that feeling when something hits you so hard that you go numb, like your brain just blue screens? I remember smiling and nodding like what he said was completely normal. Mom looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Keith had the decency to look at his plate. After dinner, Keith bailed early for some important call. Mom cleaned up while Dad watched TV. No one mentioned the toast. No one apologized. It was just another day in our family where Derek gets put in his place. That night in my childhood bedroom, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that moment over and over. Just a life lesson. 28 years of existence reduced to being someone else's cautionary tale. I scrolled through Instagram, seeing everyone living their best lives while I was still here. Still a disappointment. Still a fucking life lesson. Around 3 a.m., something in me just snapped. Not in a dramatic way with tears and breakdown, more like a cold, calm clarity. Why was I still here? Why was I letting them define me? What was I waiting for? Permission to exist. Approval I'd never get. I got up and looked around my room. Posters from college. Participation trophies Mom insisted on displaying. A life on pause. A life I was suddenly desperate to escape. I grabbed my laptop and started making plans. Checked my bank account. barely 4 figures, but it would have to do. Looked up cities far enough away that I wouldn't run into anyone who knew me. Scrolled through our personal finance and our I want out for advice. By morning, I had a plan. Not a great one, but better than staying another day as the life lesson. I packed one bag with essentials, left my gaming setup, most of my clothes, everything that tied me to this version of Derek. I wrote a note, not some dramatic "you'll regret this" BS, just "I'm leaving. Don't look for me. I'll be fine." Left it on my neatly made bed. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I blocked Dad and Keith on everything. Phone, social, email, the works. Only left Mom unblocked, but muted her notifications. I wasn't ready to cut her off completely, but I couldn't handle her enabling messages either. I called an Uber at 5:30 a.m. The driver looked half asleep and didn't try to chat, which was perfect. As we pulled away from the house, I didn't look back. Didn't feel sad, just determined. That toast was the last straw in a lifetime of being the family disappointment. The last time they'd see me as a failure. The last time I'd accept being just a life lesson. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet. Didn't have the perfect revenge plan mapped out. But I knew one thing for certain. I was done being defined by their expectations and judgment. People like my dad and Keith don't change. They don't suddenly realize they've been assholes and have some magical epiphany. But that's okay, because this isn't about changing them. It's about changing me, and maybe someday, making them regret every dismissive comment, every comparison, every moment they made me feel worthless. That birthday dinner was the end of the old Derek, the one who tolerated being the family punching bag, the one who smiled through the insults, the one who believed their BS. I had zero intention of ever letting them know where I was or what I was doing until I could come back and show them exactly what they'd thrown away. Not just show them, make them feel it. Make them depend on me for once. Make them see what happens when you underestimate someone for 28 years. That morning, I disappeared, deleted all social media accounts, and created new ones with zero connections to my past. Turned off location tracking on everything. Became a ghost to everyone who knew me before. The plan wasn't revenge, at least not yet. First, I needed to rebuild, to become someone they couldn't dismiss, someone who could hit them where it hurt when the time came. Because when I returned, and I would return, I wanted to see their faces when they realized their life lesson had become the person holding all the cards. Next time I'd see them, I'd be unrecognizable, not physically, but in every way that mattered, and they'd regret ever making that toast. That's how it started. That's the moment everything changed. And that birthday dinner? It was just the beginning. Update: waking up to a leaking ceiling and the sound of your roommate having a screaming match with his girlfriend at 7 a.m. on a Saturday hits different when you know it's still better than where you came from. That's been my life for the past year and a half. Objectively worse conditions, but somehow infinitely better for my mental health. So, a lot of you asked for an update after my last post blew up. First, thank you for all the support and advice. I read every comment, even if I didn't respond. And to answer the most common question, no, I still haven't spoken to my dad or brother. Mom texts occasionally, but I keep it brief, usually just confirming I'm alive and then changing the subject. Anyway, let me catch you up. After I left that morning, I took a bus 400 miles west to a city where I knew literally no one. Found the cheapest possible apartment on Craigslist, which, spoiler alert, is why my ceiling now leaks whenever it rains. My roommate Owen was originally just a random dude who needed someone to split rent, but more on him later. Those first few months were brutal, won't lie. My savings disappeared faster than free pizza at a gaming convention. I was working 3 different gigs, morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening shifts at a bar, and weekends doing food delivery on my bike because I couldn't afford a car. Looking back, it's actually impressive how little sleep a human can function on. The worst part wasn't even the exhaustion or the constant stress about money. It was the loneliness. Turns out, when you ghost your entire previous life, you end up spending a lot of time inside your own head. And my head wasn't exactly a fun place to be back then. All I could think about was that damn toast, replaying it over and over while doing mindless tasks at work. But something weird happens when you're fueled by pure rage for months on end. Eventually, it refines itself into something more focused. Less, I want to scream, and more, I'm going to systematically rebuild myself into someone they'll regret underestimating. The turning point came about 4 months in. I was scrolling through Reddit during my lunch break. Yes, I still only got 30 minutes to scarf down a sad sandwich between shifts, and saw a post on Araucari Learn Programming. Someone talking about how they taught themselves coding and completely changed their life. Now, I'd messed around with computers before, but never seriously. But this post had a link to some free resources, and I figured WTF, might as well try. Not like my social calendar was packed, so I started learning in whatever scraps of time I could find. 3 a.m. after bar shift, during breaks, on the bus, watching tutorials while eating ramen standing up in our kitchen because we still didn't have actual furniture. Owen noticed after a few weeks and asked what I was doing. Turns out this random roommate I'd found was actually crazy good with tech stuff. He works remotely for some startup, building apps or something. The universe throws you a bone occasionally, I guess. He started showing me stuff, recommending better resources than the random YouTube videos I was watching. Even let me use his extra laptop when mine died a tragic death after I spilled coffee on it. For someone who mostly communicates in grunts and leaves dirty dishes everywhere, Owen turned out to be pretty decent. About 7 months in, I had this weird realization while walking home from a late shift. I hadn't thought about my family for an entire day. My brain had been too occupied with trying to fix a coding problem. It felt freeing, like I was finally building something that wasn't defined by them. Around month 9, I met Olivia at this local tech meetup Owen dragged me to. I was way out of my depth, surrounded by people who actually knew what they were talking about while I was still struggling with basics. But Olivia noticed me looking lost and started explaining things. She didn't talk down to me or make me feel stupid, just broke things down in a way that actually made sense. We started meeting up at this coffee shop, not the one I worked at, thankfully, where she'd help me work through problems. At first I thought maybe she was into me, but nope. She's just genuinely one of those rare humans who enjoys helping others learn. Plus, she's gay and has an awesome girlfriend who makes the best tamales I've ever had in my life. The three of us, me, Owen, and Olivia, formed this weird little chosen family. They never asked too many questions about my past, which I appreciated. When I finally did tell them about the birthday toast incident one night after too many beers, they didn't give me pity. They got angry on my behalf, which honestly felt better than any sympathy ever could. Meanwhile, Mom kept texting, mostly surface-level stuff. Weather, her garden, how the neighbor's dog had puppies, never acknowledging the elephant in the room, that her husband had emotionally decimated her son and she'd done nothing. I respond maybe once a week, keeping it equally shallow. Around month 12, I finally quit the coffee shop gig because I got my first actual paying project through one of Olivia's connections. It was small, just building a simple website for a local band, but it felt like a massive victory. I celebrated by buying a chair that wasn't from the curb outside our building. Progress. My revenge plan was evolving too. Initially, I just wanted to disappear and make them worry. But that was too passive. Then I thought about becoming wildly successful and throwing it in their faces. But that made my success about them, which I refused to do. What I settled on was more calculated. I started researching my dad's business. Yeah, I know, kinda stalkerish, but whatever. Found their website, social media, online reviews. It wasn't hard. They're not exactly tech-savvy. Their online presence was stuck in, like 2010. I noticed they were losing ground to competitors with better digital strategy. Dad and Keith had always been traditional business guys who thought social media was for teenagers. Their website looked like it was made with GeoCities, and their SEO was non-existent. Their customer reviews showed people complaining about their outdated systems and slow response times. For a while, I just watched, collected information, noticed patterns, all while continuing to build my own skills. By month 15, I was good enough to actually be dangerous. Not an expert by any stretch, but competent enough to potentially cause some disruption if I wanted to. I set up anonymous profiles to keep tabs on them without ever revealing myself. Learned that Keith's big project, the one Dad had been so proud of at my birthday, was struggling. Their traditional approach wasn't working in the digital economy, and they were hemorrhaging clients to more innovative competitors. It would be so easy to hurt them now, to create better alternatives for their clients, to maybe drop some hints to their competitors about weaknesses in their approach. I had the knowledge and the motivation, but I held back. Not out of any lingering affection, but because timing matters for maximum impact. Last month, around the 17-month mark, I landed my biggest opportunity yet. A friend of Owen's needed someone to help with a major project. The pay was good enough that I could finally quit all my other jobs and focus entirely on building my skills. I even moved out of the leaky apartment into my own small but decent place. I still see Owen and Olivia all the time, though. They're my people now. And then, yesterday, the universe handed me the perfect opportunity for my endgame. I was browsing LinkedIn. Yes, I finally made a professional profile, but under a variation of my name that my family wouldn't recognize, and saw an announcement about an upcoming industry conference, the kind of event where companies showcase their innovations and network with potential clients. And guess whose company will be presenting there? Keith's. Apparently, they're trying to rebrand themselves as forward-thinking and innovative, which, based on what I've seen, is laughable. They've slapped some buzzwords on the same old approach and called it revolutionary. So I applied for a pass to attend, not as an exhibitor, but as an attendee, anonymous, just another face in the crowd, until I choose not to be. I don't know exactly how it'll play out yet, but after 18 months of rebuilding myself from scratch, of working until my eyes burned and my back ached, of learning and growing and planning, I'm finally ready for the next phase. The conference is in 3 weeks. I've already booked my ticket. And when I walk into that convention center, it won't be as the family disappointment. It won't be as the punchline to a cruel toast. It'll be as someone who built himself back up, specifically to tear them down. They haven't seen me in a year and a half, haven't heard from me except through Mom's occasional text updates that I'm still alive. They have no idea what I'm capable of now. No idea that their life lesson has been studying exactly how to hit them where it hurts most, their precious business reputation and bottom line. So that's where things stand. From sleeping on a mattress on the floor and working 3 jobs to having actual career prospects and a plan for revenge. Not bad for 18 months of work. Next time I post, it'll be after the conference, after I've seen Keith's face when he realizes who's standing in front of him, after I've set in motion the chain of events that will make my dad regret ever raising that glass. Update 2. It's been exactly 3 years since that birthday dinner, the one where my dad raised his glass to my brother and then looked at me like I was something he'd stepped in. 3 years is a long time to plan, but revenge isn't something you rush if you want it to stick. Scrolling through my socials this morning, I spotted Dad had posted another one of those sappy throwbacks with my brother. Some fishing trip from years ago, all smiles and matching hats, with one of those cringe captions about teaching my boy everything I know. The comments section was just a bunch of his golf buddies dropping heart emoji. NJL 2 years ago, this would have sent me spiraling. Today, I just smirked at my phone screen, because today was the day everything would come full circle. See, after that birthday dinner, I went completely ghost mode with my family. No calls, no texts, blocked on everything. They tried reaching out at first. Even my golden boy brother sent a few awkward messages asking if I was okay. Mom called from different numbers. Dad, predictably, did the bare minimum. A single text saying we needed to talk like a man. Classic. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just sulking in my apartment, eating delivery and playing video games. Okay, there was some of that too, NBD. I was planning, researching, learning. My rage wasn't the hot kind that burns out fast. It had cooled into something hard and patient. First step was finding out about Dad's business troubles. Not hard when your childhood best friend's cousin works in the same industry and likes to chat after a few drinks. Turns out the Pride and Joy toast came right when Dad's company was struggling, and he was counting on some connections my brother had made at his fancy university to save his bacon. Interesting. I started small, created a few burner accounts, and began dropping subtle hints on local business forums about potential issues with Dad's vendors. Nothing libelous, just vague enough to make people hesitate. Started conversations with his competitors, pretending to be a dissatisfied client. Sent anonymous tips to some of his partners about tax concerns that would trigger internal reviews. Meanwhile, I was building myself up, hit the gym religiously, started dressing better, got my finances sorted, cut out the toxic habits. Not because I wanted Dad's approval anymore, that ship had sailed, but because success truly is the best revenge, and I needed to be strong for what came next. The real breakthrough came 6 months ago when I discovered Dad had been hiding some serious financial issues from Mom. Not just business struggles, he'd been moving money around, taking out loans against their house, the kind of stuff that makes divorce lawyers rub their hands together with glee. I anonymously mailed Mom some paperwork I'd found while helping organize some old files. That household imploded faster than a TikTok trend. But the master stroke? I'd been quietly reaching out to Dad's biggest client for months, positioning myself as a consultant in exactly the niche they needed. Never mentioned my connection to Dad. Different last name thanks to my mom's first marriage made that easy. By the time I was in the door, I'd built enough trust that when I eventually discovered and disclosed the potential conflict of interest, they were already committed to working with me. I still remember the meeting where I first saw Dad after nearly 3 years. The look on his face when he walked in and saw me sitting at the conference table with his biggest client, the client who was now explaining they would be taking their business elsewhere, to me. Dad aged 10 years in 10 seconds. His hand trembled slightly as he set down his portfolio. The man who had always filled rooms with his presence suddenly looked small. The weeks that followed were a slow-motion car crash for him. Mom moved out, taking half of everything. The business struggled without its anchor client. His perfect son, my brother, was too busy with his own life to step in and save the day. Turns out, the golden child doesn't shine so bright when actual work is involved, instead of just accepting praise. Last night, Dad called me for the first time in forever. Not to apologize, he's not capable of that, but to ask for help. Said he was in trouble. Said he knew I'd made something of myself, after all. Asked if we could meet for dinner to discuss opportunities. The audacity was almost impressive. So here I am, sitting in my car outside the same restaurant where he humiliated me 3 years ago. He doesn't know I've chosen this place deliberately. He's already inside. I can see him through the window checking his watch every 30 seconds. He looks nervous. Good. I'm not going in. That's not how this ends. Instead, I've just texted him a screenshot. It's from my banking app, showing the transfer I just made paying off the remainder of my student loans. Loans he swore I'd never be able to handle on my own. Alongside it, I sent a simple message. Consider this my toast to you, Dad. You were right about one thing. I was a life lesson, just not the one you thought. Then I blocked his number. As I pull away from the curb, I realize I'm not even angry anymore. That burning need for revenge has been replaced by something else. Not forgiveness. He doesn't deserve that. But a sense of completion, of closing a circle that needed to be closed. My phone buzzes with a message from my brother. Apparently, Dad is blowing up his phone now, frantic about where I am. For a brief moment, I consider blocking him too. But instead, I just put my phone on silent and toss it onto the passenger seat. Some people say living well is the best revenge. They're wrong. The best revenge is making someone face exactly who they are, stripped of all their pretenses. Dad wanted to be the big man dispensing life lessons. Well, lesson learned. I merge onto the highway, windows down, music up. 3 years ago, I drove away from that restaurant in tears. Tonight, I'm driving towards something better. The rear view is getting smaller, and for the first time in forever, I'm not looking back.